I'm in Tikal, one of the top tourist destinations in Guatemala. I'm in the north of the country, deep in the jungle, and back in Mayan times, this perhaps wasn't the most important city, but today it's perhaps the most important archaeological site because it's so vast and so well known, and as exampled by these people going past me right now, so well visited. Most of it is still covered up by jungle, but a lot of the huge monuments like this have been revealed. Now, this has been declared a UNESCO heritage site, not just because of the archaeological remains, but also because of the natural environment here, the birds, the animals, the trees and so forth, which creates something of a dilemma because it means that now the rules have changed and they're not allowed to uncover a complete monument because that destroys too much of the nature. But on the other hand, they want to show people this amazing stonework, so they have to hit a compromise. Now, Tikal was one of many city-states, little city-statelets. There are about 60 of them in the world of the Maya, and they're a bit like Greek city-states in that they have a shared culture, a shared writing system, a shared dating system and so forth, but they were also bitter rivals. They fought many wars of conquest and between each other, and so the history is quite complicated, although we know a fair bit about the history because of these things. These are stela, or stelae, standing stones which had inscriptions and were set up in front of these huge monuments. And they tell the story of kings and of particular astronomical observations and datable things. We know a lot about how the Mayan calendar worked because of those precisely dated astronomical events. I have to say that having spent the day here, I'm doing this piece to camera towards the end of my time here, I am very impressed. The noises that I've heard today, what the hell, just watch the video.
It was a long drive, but you can't be both an archaeologist and in Guatemala and then not go to Tikal. Anyway, I had plenty of unfamiliar things to look at on the way. These are Brahman cattle, a breed created in the USA from Indian stock and very popular here because they are good with high heat, humidity and parasite loads. My tough-looking driver was, I was told, and it was easy to believe, ex-Special Forces and, though I never saw it, supposedly had access to a gun for our protection.
One difference I've noticed between this vehicle and one that one might typically observe in Britain is the hazard warning light button, because this one has clearly been used many, many times.
We came to a well-manned checkpoint. The sign said, "No guns allowed." Kaibil. That's the name of a unit of specialist Guatemalan elite jungle fighting troops. Once past, more signs told us to drive carefully, and I seldom see warning signs of jaguars. Deer, yes. Snakes, no. Understandable, as the road went straight through jungle. Turkeys? Yes. Turkeys, and much prettier than the ones we have at home. Blue is rare in nature.
Another one. Right.
One more time.
This one is for insects.
Yeah. I don't know if it works, man.
Well, it smells as though it should work.
Someone crashed a big drone here recently, narrowly missing someone, so they have banned the things.
Now this is my idea of a big tropical tree. Look at the size of the thing. This is a ceiba tree, and it is important in Mayan cosmology as it represents down here the roots, the underworld. The trunk is the world that we live in, and there were 13 levels. That's an awful lot of hierarchy, isn't it? 13 levels of the upper world, the heavens. Now this one is quite old and possibly not in the best of health because normally the tops are much, much wider and they cast a huge amount of shade. Right up there you can see a lot of sort of furry things. I'm not entirely sure what the material that comes from those is, but it's some sort of fibrous stuff, possibly kapok, and it was used for stuffing life vests back in the time of World War I. So if you were a sailor, you'd have a float vest, a life preserver. One interesting thing is that these don't get very old. They can live up to 500 years, but they very seldom get that far because they are the tallest tree in this area, and they are a national icon partly because of that. I mean, look, it's got great shape and so forth, and that's one of the reasons it's one of the symbolic plants of Guatemala. But unfortunately, it also means that you act as something of a lightning rod. And I wonder if that might explain why the canopy of the jungle here is often quite so flat, because if you win the competition to get taller than everyone else so that you can spread your leaves and get more sun, you might make yourself the tallest lightning rod in the forest, and then, well, then you lose the competition.
We did get a bit lost.
Does it say
Do you
entrance?
know where you are?
Well, that's what we're looking for. It's so bad.
Where do you... Oh, there's also a knife and fork here.
See.
But then, after a bit, we found something.
Right, well, this is a drainage channel. That's easy enough to recognize. It takes water from up there to down there. And it's made out of concrete. It's been cast in sections. You can see a join here. And there was a problem on this site with drainage, so they decided to get a load of modern engineers to survey the place and to work out where would be a good place to put a drainage channel. And this they then did, and they started digging, and then they found a Mayan drainage channel in exactly that place. So though this is a modern drainage channel, it's actually a reconstruction of the Mayan one which was here before, and that would have been made out of stucco, a mixture of lime mortar and tree resins and so forth. And this would have taken an awful lot of heat to create, because you've got to burn the limestone, and it would take something like 5 tons of wood for every ton of limestone mortar. So that would have had quite a deforesting effect, one might imagine. So there you go. And I imagine that the engineers who surveyed this area and found it must have patted themselves on the back, because it seems that they got the answer right for where to put the channel. Walking along this path, you might not notice that there's a house platform here. You see a slight rise here. It's reasonably steep, and then flatness. So this is an artificial flat platform. It used to be a constant slope, but they've built it up at that end. A lot of these platforms have stone foundations, but as far as we know, the ordinary people living in this ordinary residential area had wooden and thatched houses on these platforms. This is the central court of the F group, and we're going this way.
This perfectly flat-floored forest is actually a stucco-covered terrace through which trees have grown over the centuries. Leaves? You see here in my hand a lump of the stucco. It was just lying on the ground.
It belongs in a museum.
What?
Ethical dilemma
Oh,
time.
look over there.
There we go.
What?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
An owl butterfly. Then we came across a huge stone mound rising out of the vegetation. This is today simply called Temple 38, which gives you an idea of how mysterious everything remains.
This has just been stabilized. They've just shored it up with some wood temporarily. It'll be consolidated later and... The Central Acropolis. Obviously it was very important to them that a lot of people were able to go up and down stairs at exactly the same time. Otherwise, why have a staircase that's 50 feet wide? And you can see that it's tall. Apparently this building that we're going up to this way was one of the first buildings that led to the discovery of this city. It was sticking up visibly out of the jungle. This apparently is a residential complex. And I find it amazing that we're the only people here.
Practicality in use and ease of construction seem to have been way down the list of the Mayans' priorities.
Right, we can see a staircase here, starting in unison, but gradually the difference between the two ages of staircase increases. I'm imagining they widened a narrower one, although I could be completely wrong. And there's some carving in the stucco here. And we've got a very, very clear roof line here showing you how narrow the space within the walls was.
This little thatched roof protects a surviving patch of carved stucco.
We're about to go into someone's very well preserved bedroom. You can see on this side of it the very steep corbelling. They don't seem to be using keystones. And this amazing lintel. Why is it so amazing? Well, it's wood, which is pretty amazing given that we're in a rainforest and it's still here in situ. So presumably this is 15th century wood or even older. If this had rotted away, you'd imagine that all this stuff would have come down. So it's doing a good job keeping me safe at the moment. I trust this bit of wood, that's why I'm standing here. And inside, we see a platform here where people would have slept, and another platform above that. That could have had, of course, one of 1,000 uses, but you could kneel at it and work at it perhaps. And this end has collapsed, as you can see, but we have good reason to believe that there would have been a window there, partly because of the Mayan habit of symmetry. There's a window here, very well crafted, in this very, very thick wall, so that gives you a good indication of how thick the wall is. It must be at least an arm's length thick. Not a huge amount of space, but certainly solid enough. And there are various beam holes in the wall which indicate where other functional things would have come out across. Looks like there were some beams going across up there. I suppose you could have all sorts of things hanging, possibly even another sleeping platform up there, I don't know. I'm told that these holes either side would have had a bar across and a curtain. So I would have had to have ducked down like that to get out. Ooh. This is known as the 5-story building, and there's a good reason for that. It has 5 stories, and it's the only 5-story building here, so that's all they needed to name it. Some extraordinary things about it are the state of preservation, because some of this wood is apparently original. That beam sticking out there, possibly if Jeremy moves left and right a bit, he'll be able to show you in parallax that beam that's sticking out there is very, very old wood indeed. There were 2 species that the Maya had, which could last a very, very long time. You can see that the lintel in the middle there is modern replacement wood. And you can also see through there on the back wall original stucco with graffiti from lots of different periods, some of it very clearly modern, but some of it going back quite a bit further. This rubble here has been consolidated in part by the deliberate planting of this interesting plant with purple leaves on the underside and green on the top. And across the way, brace yourself now because this is pretty amazing, we have Temple 5. Get a load of that. It's dedicated to the rain god, and there was once a massive face on that side of it in stucco, but that is unfortunately missing. That's the first seriously big temple that they built here. And in between, you can see there's a big dip, this great drop down there. Now you've got to imagine, of course, that there were no trees there at all. Instead, we would be staring across the waters of a massive reservoir. They had to build massive reservoirs here because there's a huge problem. There are no rivers flowing by, and you can't dig effective wells here. If you dig down, you don't get good water, you just hit rock. So in order to sustain a big city, you had to create reservoirs, and the platforms here would drain into that reservoir, which when at its fullest capacity, it has been estimated, would supply 2 years worth of water for 10,000 people. So the engineering was pretty good. It was sealed with stucco and clay and wasn't very far away from all the big stuff, so they didn't have to travel very far to get their water, which is convenient because they didn't have any beasts of burden, no horses, no oxen to pull carts, anything like that. Everything had to be carried. When I first saw that, I went, whoa! Something like that. And so there you go. I've just reenacted the moment of my first seeing that. I'll do it again. Whoa!
Can you see the faces?
Right, now you have to brace yourself for the site of the central Acropolis. Acropolis, of course, literally means city which is high. High as in acrophobia. And in front of you here, we see the Temple of the Jaguar, which I think you'll agree is pretty flipping impressive. You know, when it comes to breathtakingness, come on, Jeremy, come on, go over here. We haven't got all day. We've got the central Acropolis, and that way, I'm looking north towards the North Acropolis, that platform over there. And that way, to the west, we have the Temple of the Snake. And we got our first glimpse of part of a ball court. Ball courts were normally much longer than that. That one's been truncated by later buildings, but it gives you a pretty good idea. You've got the central flat bit, and then you've got the slopes either side, two platforms flanked by near vertical walls, and above that, because of course it was a spectator sport, would be the crowd. There was a bit of an oops moment when the Pennsylvanian archaeologists who were investigating the North Acropolis there, after taking down an awful lot of stones to see what was beneath and having every intention of putting them back in the correct places, found that, whoops, they couldn't. Hey-ho, I noticed that we're actually walking on original Mayan stucco surfaces here. Around the corner here you can see great big cracks in it which go through down to the stone. So here I'm standing on what are quite clearly stones, but this is a thick layer of stucco over the top.
A young tourist pointed to the top of the Temple of the Jaguar and asked, "How did they get those stones up there?" I suggested that they probably built the bottom bit first. Harsh?
You can see here the well-worked ashlars that are in situ where they were intended to be, and you can also see a load of rubble there. That was not intended to be there. That was once roofing and upper stories, and that's all come crashing down. So when, of course, all this was originally dug up, that's what a great deal of it looked like. And over here, we can see just a plant-covered slope of rubble, but hiding underneath that, there's actually a great big staircase. And what might that have looked like? Well, like that. Oh, I really want to go up this stair, but apparently I'm not allowed to anymore. Something about unnecessary damage and risk or something. But you can see that it is quite unnecessarily wide for a staircase. And the steps are also very big, which hints at another purpose for this. You can imagine this is also like stadium seating, so you could get a lot of people there to witness whatever happened here. The modern Maya, and there are about 6 million Maya speakers still in Guatemala today, many of them still practice the old religion to some degree. And here we have an altar which is very strongly smelling today of incense, which has been burned very recently indeed. This isn't actually old, this has only been here for a few years, but still there are some ceremonies enacted upon it. Now, one thing that is amazing about where we are is the acoustics. Now, that way and that way, there are these two massive temples with loads and loads of steps. So if I were to say clap my hand, every step would echo, send the vibrations coming back to me very, very slightly later. So the bottom one would send back an echo, then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And these arrive, therefore, not all at the same time. So you get a really strange bird call effect from the echo. And this is meant to be quite like the quetzal, the national bird of Guatemala. So let's hope this works. Just listen for the weird sort of squeak sound after the clap. That's very strange. It really does sound like a bird, doesn't it? Right up there is where the king would address the people down here. So one would imagine that if you're going to make a speech from right up here, you'd want good acoustics. And the acoustics back when all these temples were complete and full height and not overgrown with vegetation would have been much louder, much sharper. In front of each of these temples there is a stela or two, the plural being stele, because it's actually a Greek word, standing stone on which would be inscriptions. These ones are all south-facing, so they would get the sun all day, and in front of each would have been what is normally called an altar, and perhaps offerings would be put on those. One has to speculate to some degree as to exactly how they were used. How literate was the population? You could say that because there was writing here for the common man to see, that meant that the common man could read. I wouldn't say that one necessarily follows from the other, but there was a lot of information about what was in the building behind. This was largely a necropolis. There were hundreds of burials in this, and on these would be, of course, calendar dates and the deeds of kings, births, deaths and marriages, victories in war, that sort of thing. So we know a huge amount about quite specific dates and specific kings, but almost nothing is written about the ordinary people. So in some ways, what we know is amazingly detailed. We can say that a particular king ascended to the throne on the 6th of August in 826 or something like that. We can be to the day precise, and yet a lot of other stuff we know nothing about.
Can you see the faces?
I've just been given a hint. If I clap more in that direction. That is amazing. And I dare say I'm confusing a lot of people. Why is that guy clapping? Because earlier I came here and I heard someone do a very slow clap, and I thought that, well, never mind what I thought.
This angle of sunlight makes the details stand out.
Here we have a depiction of royalty. It's generally the case that if you see a person depicted large and from the front like this, it's going to be a king or a queen. This one is very unusual because it's a queen. And how can we tell? Well, because what king would have hips like that? The face has been deliberately vandalized, unfortunately, so we don't know what it looked like, but we can see remains of a spectacular headdress. Characters normally did have huge and elaborate headdresses, quite often with Mayan glyphs in them, actually having some meaning, perhaps naming the character or a god that was to which the stela was dedicated. And at the feet of the victorious queen, we see a captive. There's his foot, his knees down here, and you can see there's his hand, and his arms have been bound like this behind him, so he's thoroughly trussed. And unfortunately, the future prospects for people in this situation were very poor. They like to sacrifice prisoners taken in war to the gods. So, the Lady of Tikal. Here we have the stela of a king. This was a very late king, perhaps the last king of Tikal in its heyday, its glory of Mayan culture. His name was Hasau Chankawil II. Yes, he actually used a little glyph for number 2. Of course, his namesake was the first great king of Tikal, perhaps the greatest of them all. So this is an example of someone using the glories of his past to glorify himself. He was trying to stress that he was part of that direct lineage, and he was using the name, I suppose, to legitimize his rule and inspire everyone into greater glories. Remember, like the good old days. Unfortunately, it didn't last, and by 900, Tikal had fallen into ruin. The civilization here collapsed. It is an extraordinary thing that they have a Stone Age civilization. We don't have the equivalent of it in Europe. By the time we have what's definitely describable as a civilization, complete with stuff like writing, we have metal. And we think of the Stone Age, therefore, as primitive and pre-civilization. But in the New World, there were Stone Age civilizations able to trace lineages back and to read writing from centuries and centuries in the past. And so it was possible for someone to call himself after a king who had not lived for many, many centuries, and for everyone to actually understand the meaning of that, which is quite an achievement for any civilization. Now, one thing that was really puzzling me about the design of these temples was that they have these very broad staircases, which you could get loads of people on, and they have these great big flat platforms either side, and you can imagine that loads of people could stand there and have a very good view of whatever was happening. But there's no obvious way to get from the main staircase to those side platforms. It's quite a drop, and there's no indication that there were wooden steps or ladders or anything, which would have rotted away anyway. But now I know I've come round the side of the temple and I see that clinging to the side is this perilously narrow staircase that gives you access up onto the platform there. Someone has just told me that priests would use this to light incense up the sides. I'm not completely convinced that that was their only use. Just you could get any number of people up on the side, and possibly the narrowness of this suggests that it's not a public spectacle. That if one man walked up that massive staircase or down that massive staircase at the front, the amount of space either side of him would say to the world, I am incredibly important. Whereas this looks like it's just a way of getting onto the platform, not for ceremonies. Oh, and sorry. This is an artist's impression of the North Acropolis as seen looking across the central plaza. So you've got the two temples flanking either side, and you can see that the North Acropolis was really quite tall once, but as I say, oops. And there's a repeating pattern of 3. It takes a little bit of looking at it and a little bit of interpretation, but the number 3 is a sort of special magical number in an awful lot of cultures, it seems. And you have this and this and this, making a triad, and within this you have that and that and that, making a triad. And the grinding stones that the Maya use, and which are still in use in Guatemala today, so you've got a roller on the top, they too have tripods underneath them. Now, of course, a tripod is a very practical shape. It means that you can get it steady on any surface, but there is supposedly also this cosmic significance of 3.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but it occurs to me that some of you might want a bit more, what you might call in-depth knowledge about what I'm talking about here, the Stone Age civilizations of Mesoamerica. In which case, there is a way you can do this, because my sponsor has a series of 48 lectures on precisely this topic. Oh, I should explain. My sponsor is not the Great Courses Plus, my most loyal and I think first sponsor, but instead is Wondrium, which is sort of the same, but better. It's actually the same company, largely the same people in the same studios, making the same sort of stuff, but they've changed the name to Wondrium, which is shorter, and it's Wondrium. It's got more, you can say it with a bit more woomph, and it's sort of the same, but it's just more. It's all the same, but just more, and you can take advantage of a free offer by going to wondrium.com/Lindybeige, or, much easier, clicking the link in the description to this video, and then for that trial period you'll be able to wander around the site and have a look at whatever you want. They got lectures on all sorts of things. They got lectures on all, these sort of topics, you see, just loads of them, including Maya to Aztec, Ancient Mesoamerica Revealed, a series of 48 lectures, each half hour. That's 24 hours. That's a full day of knowledge, and it actually compares reasonably well with the sort of amount of lectures you'd get on a topic at university level. So you'd have more in-depth knowledge. You wouldn't just say your one fact, did you know, and then shut up because you just learned one fact. No, you'd be able to hold forth at dinner parties and so forth, and really impress people with the depth of your knowledge. And you'd feel that warmer glow inside. I actually understand this. I don't just have a couple of facts, some shallow knowledge, like, for example, that the city of Teotihuacan had a population, this is in Mexico today, Aztecs, a population of 150,000 people, it is reckoned. And that is a lot. You've got to remember, this is a Stone Age civilization, and yet it's able to support a population of that vastness all in one place. That requires a huge amount of organization, and it puts it on a par with Babylon. Babylon had roughly that number of people, and Babylon in the ancient world was just a byword for the huge successful city. And in modern terms, it's about the size of modern day Oxford. So yeah, it was a big city, and you all know that, but so much more because of the in-depth knowledge. But some of you may be wondering about the quality of the lectures, cradles. Well, I have to say, I was disappointed. If cradle work is what you're watching for, he's going to let you down. He does a little bit of parallel waving, but really, I can't recommend him for that. But to be fair, that outfit that's pretty beige. So, yeah. Anyway, so why not take advantage of this course, which is pretty well reviewed? You've got an average of 4.6 out of 5 from 153 reviews, which I think you'll agree is a pretty high average. Of course, those are reviews given by the sort of people who have chosen to watch a series of 48 lectures on Mesoamerica. But on the other hand, if you're thinking of watching a series of 48 lectures on Mesoamerica, you're a member of that group. So you're getting the opinions of very pertinent people. So it's quite a good rating system, perhaps. So there you go. Wondrium.com. Give it a try.
And these are the steps that I am allowed to go up. So there's no blinking stopping me. Well, other than possibly exhaustion. So tempting to jump across onto that tree.
The faces are much clearer from up here. Tikal had 33 rulers that we know of in a dynasty stretching across the centuries, and then the whole place was abandoned without any apparent sign of warfare.
So what does the staircase look like from the top of those stairs? It appears to be just a cliff edge until I lean out a bit and you could see just how flipping steep that is. It's far steeper than 45 degrees. That's quite a hair-raising drop, and it makes me think that if there were people at the top seated and someone fell and then landed on someone else who then fell, by the time you got to the people at the bottom, my goodness, the carnage.
While I was up here, I shot some footage of 2 tourists way down at the bottom. I could hear every word they said so easily.
Now I'm going to start taking photos. Now I'm going to take real photos, okay? Wait for me.
Temple 3.
Temple 3, okay. Another stela, another temple.
To be honest, he's afraid, a lot more afraid of us than we are of him, the jaguar.
Here, an excavated part of the site, and on the right, unexcavated. Another temple, but still covered in soil, but they've taken off most of the trees, I see. Roots do damage, turf preserves. 5D-87, or The Temple of the Skulls. You pick your favourite title. The outer skin of this was built in the 7th century AD. We then climbed the Lost World Pyramid. From up here you can see how the tallest trees are Saba trees. Told you. And, ooh, look! A toucan.
Way off in the distance there, you can see the northern rim of a basin. That far horizon there is a series of hills that mark the far north edge of that basin, and everything between here and there is jungle. And way off in that distance is the city of Mirador, one of the Mayan cities. And today, if you want to get to it, really you need a helicopter. Now, there are people who want to build roads in that northern area, but unfortunately, as soon as you build roads, that means it's possible to get a logging lorry along. The rot sets in and the forest starts to disappear. So at the moment, there is a political campaign to make sure that people are not allowed to build roads up there, because once you've got roads, you've got cattle ranches and no more jungle.
It is reckoned that only about 1/5 of the stone city has been uncovered to date. There doesn't seem to be much left of the wooden houses of the ordinary people. This is known as the best place to watch the sunset from, and so every evening the migrating tame life, the tourists in the local language, come to roost here in anticipation. At first they are a bit noisy, but in time a hushed reverence comes over them and we are able to listen to the music of the jungle. We wanted the place to ourselves, so we told all the tourists to leave.
This is the Astronomical Observatory, also known as the Lost World Pyramid. It's the oldest structure that we know of in Tikal. At its base, there is a small temple that was built in 600 BC, and like a series of Russian dolls, there are more and more temples added onto the outside of it until the top level was 600 AD. So this was built over the course of 1,200 years, and it's a very special place to watch a sunset from.
And then we climbed down. It was dark and we had to find our hotel. If you come here, bring a torch. Darkness falls quickly and down in the jungle it falls hard. My guide wanted to show me another temple some distance away, but this was ruled unwise for safety reasons. There might have been nefarious types there waiting for us. Instead, we climbed some entirely safe wooden scaffolding. By torchlight at night can be the best way to observe the giant stucco faces on the temples, particularly if you want to read the glyphs on them.
Then it pronounced down, and we can see the Ahau, Holy Lord, and we can see the emblem of this city, Tikal. You see, Mutal there, Mu, and then the glyph Tal.
Ants. They love their leaves. There's a soldier ant built for combat, following the chemical trail. A male great curassow, apparently. I mean, obviously. Why, though, do some leaves go the other way? You're going the wrong way, mate. No, this one's got to go back to the depot. It's faulty. Forget the depot. They pay us per cutting. Just deliver it, get your money, and then it's somebody else's problem. Right you are. Ah, a yellow-tailed thing with a yellow tail. Possibly a Montezuma oropendola? Leech. Harvestman. Spider.